Casser-Jayne Show. Let's talk. And I am Halli Casser-Jayne. Welcome to my listeners in the United States and around the world. Tune in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show at hallicasserjayne.com. Food, wine. Is there a better combination? Today on the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, from the world of food, 2 times James Beard Award winner David Leite, the founder of the popular website Leite's Culinaria, and now the author of a truly brave and moving memoir, Notes on a Banana, a story of food, love, and manic depression. And also joining me at my table, a glass of rosé in both our hands, is wine maven Jennifer Simonetti-Bryan to talk about the new rosé revolution, the subject of her fun, informative book, Rosé Wine, The Guide to Drinking Pink. Good food, good wine, great conversation on the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. Let's get to it. Rosé wines have been the Rodney Dangerfields of wine. They have gotten no respect. But according to wine maven Jennifer Simonetti-Bryan, forget your grandmother's blush. There is a rosé revolution going on, and Simonetti-Bryan tells all in her new, fun, informative book, Rosé Wine, The Guide to Drinking Pink. Move over dark red wines, Simonetti-Bryan rejoices. It's time for some rosé. Learn about its history, how rosés are made, what countries and regions of the world produce rosés today. Simonetti-Bryan even offers up a quick and easy wine quiz to determine your style, blush, crisp, fruity, or rich, and consult her signature wine wheel to find out which wines you'll like best. Each style category features a comprehensive overview detailing key regions, grapes, and winemaking practices, and full information about the bottles you need to try, complete with sample labels, tasting notes, price, and food pairings. Jennifer Simonetti-Bryan, M.W., comes with her bonafides. She's the 4th woman in America to qualify as a Master of Wine, the world's top wine credential. She won the 2008 Tasting Trophy from the Institute of Masters of Wine and is the author of the 1-Minute Wine Master. She serves as a judge in major wine and spirit competitions worldwide and has trained thousands of professionals in the hospitality industry. She's appeared on The Today Show, The Anderson Cooper Show, Fox and Friends, Fox Business, Fox News, Bloomberg, ABC, CBS, NBC, on Sirius XM, Martha Stewart, Bloomberg, and in print, Fortune, Oprah, and Wine Enthusiast. Let's talk. Can you hear me, Jennifer?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, great. Nice to have you here. Listen, I love anybody who would put a picture of Jimi Hendrix swigging from a bottle of Mateus in their book. You are my kind of gal. I was just laughing my head off when I saw that. That was just great. But all joking aside, let's talk rosés. Now, they have come a long way, Jennifer, but maybe we should define what it is for people who may not know what a rosé is.
A rosé wine pretty much is the umbrella category for any wine that is pink. And so it's not red and it's not white. It's some level of pink. And there is a category called blush underneath rosé, which is meant for wines that are slightly sweet, kind of like Mateus or white Zinfandel. Those are considered blush wines, but it's under the enormous umbrella of rosé, which encompasses any wine that is pink.
Okay, pink is the clue. So now I can remember that rosés were, as I said in my intro, that the Rodney Dangerfields of wine, they got no respect. So give us a little history. I mean, it's true. You know it. I remember my mother saying, do not bring that into the house, please, darling. And she was a real wine aficionado. But give us a little history so we can put this in perspective. And by the way, it wasn't just Jimi Hendrix who enjoyed Mateus. Queen Elizabeth did, too. I mean, I saw that in the book.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. I mean, back in the 70s and 80s, I mean, if Queen Elizabeth and Jimi Hendrix are drinking the same thing, it's got to be cool. So I think that's really what brought it out. And it's so friendly. All types of rosés are very, very friendly wines, which is the reason why, what was it? It went to 4 million cases almost immediately, Mateus. And then white Zinfandel took off, and that was it. And then it started, I don't know why people, it lost respect. I guess after Jimi Hendrix died, that was it. I think that there's people who kind of looked down on it because it was sweet, which I don't understand, because some of the longest lived and highest quality wines in the world are sweet. Look at German Rieslings, look at Sauterne, you look at some incredible wines, and we in America, we love sweet things. And in fact, I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing an enormous push in rosé, and I think the United States is leading a rosé revolution, partly because we are the number one nation consuming wine. We still are. We've been doing it for like 5 years in a row now, and there's more room to grow. And then back in the early 2000s, you had Pink Moscato, which really became a craze, and you heard it in all different songs, and it really became part of this culture. And then you had, I don't know if you remember this, from 2014 or 2015, I remember being on Bloomberg television and talking about the horror in the Hamptons. Was it ISIS? No. Was it an earthquake? No. No, it was simply that they ran out of Provence rosé and had a shortage of it. And they did it 2 years in a row, and this kind of tongue-in-cheek news story got out, and people started going, well, hey, well, the Hamptons are where the rich and swanky hang out, and yet their wines, they're very affordable, because Provence rosé is like, what, at maximum, it's like $20. So I want to be swanky and still look kind of cool. And it's a perfect dry rosé that they have out there with lots of different seafood because it's on Long Island. And then, of course, you had Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, who bought a $60 million chateau in Provence. And if Brangelina's drinking it, everybody's going to be drinking it.
So there you go. There you go.
So there's a confluence of a lot of different areas that made sure that we now know about rosé, and it's getting some respect. And I think sommeliers looked to Brangelina in the Hamptons going, well, we used to have white Zinfandel on the by the glass menu. Maybe we should start having some Provence rosé. And so now you may not only see one, but you might see two rosés on the list. So
there you go.
There's going to be a lot more of it because they're so friendly.
You know, it's a funny thing about wine, though. What is it with wine? More than just about anything, maybe sneakers also does this. Now, this is a stretch, right? Wine to sneakers. But there are fads in wine. Like there are fads in sneakers. Why is that, do you think?
Yeah. I think that people like trying new things, and with wine, particularly because there's new vintages, but there's new areas and new places to grow things, and more diversity than ever. I think people like experimenting. I think people like knowing about wines from Georgia and wines from New Zealand, wines from Tasmania, places that they've never heard of before, but perhaps never tried. And so I think the discovery is part of it with wine. I don't know about sneakers, but maybe I always thought with sneakers that they make you run faster, but I don't know. So.
No, style was a pretty big part of that too. Listen to me. What about this? You do talk about this in the book, and I think it's interesting because it used to be that we said rosé and we said summer. You don't go there anymore. You say it's all year round. Talk to me.
Yeah, I think that we used to pigeonhole it in any time between Memorial Day and Labor Day, like white shoes. Now, because of the popularity and the crowd friendliness of rosé, it's all year round. I moved from New York to Los Angeles, and I'm noticing a trend all across the country where there's actually an area for rosé. It's not just between Memorial Day and Labor Day anymore. You're seeing it all year round.
Which is cool. That's great. Before we move forward, I got to ask you about you. You're fascinating. That's true. You're the fourth woman. Yeah, I think you're the fourth woman in America to qualify as a Master of Wine, the world's top wine credential. And you're very young and very beautiful, by the way. How did you get all of this? I mean, and how hard was it to rise in the ranks of respectability in the world of wine?
I'm older than I look.
Yeah.
But I used to be in investment banking. This is so much more fun. I knew nothing about wine in 2000, and then I got the Master of Wine exam in 2008. And it's a 4-day exam, and part of the exam is identifying 36 wines blind, and then they have 4 days of essays where it's on winemaking, viticulture, quality assurance, quality control, global political issues, as well as business. And so after that, if you pass, and that's a 10% pass rate, then you get to write a research paper, about 10,000 words within 6 months. Now, you only get 3 chances to pass. If you don't, they make you wait 5 years, and you have to start all over again. So you don't want to waste any of the time, any of your wishes. So it's intense.
It's intense, and you did it, and good for you. Do you drink rosés, by the way? I should ask.
I do. Yeah, a lot more now. As far as this book, the biggest question people asked me was, are there enough rosés out there to fill a book? And of course I said, oh yeah, of course there is. And then I started going around going, God, I hope there is. And it turns out there is. I mean, I have 70 different recommendations on rosé, and these aren't the only rosés out there. I mean, there are 70 different types or archetypes that I have in here that I think that people would find, and you can find more of. And just to give you an idea of how affordable these are, 75% of the recommendations I give in this book are under $20, and 50% of them are under $15. So these are great to bring to any kind of party. And Mother's Day is coming up, so whether your mother drinks rosé or she just makes you drink, I think it's a great gift.
Well, I'm going to tell you what also was a great gift. The book itself is darling. It is fantastic. I don't know who did the artwork and put this thing together, but it is adorable and brilliant, and it would make a great gift with goblets and a couple of bottles of wine, or only by itself.
Yeah.
I love this book. I mean, I was thinking I know exactly who to send it to for the holidays when, for Mother's Day coming up. I mean, I'm like laughing my head off. No, that's great. I had to make that point because I hope you had a good input into the look of it, because the look is fantastic. Not to mention the content is great as well. I assume you're happy with it, yes?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. And I wanted to make sure that there were pictures in there, and they insisted actually on having the entire bottle, not just the label in there, so that people could know what the entire bottle looks like. Because sometimes people get confused when they go into the store and they forgot. And if it's just the label, they may get confused again. So having an entire bottle shot in there is really nice.
Okay, I don't want to get too technical, but I do want to get into this because I am curious about this. In terms of producing rosés, what's the difference between how they produce a white or a red or to get to a rosé? Is there a magic to this?
Yeah, there's magic in all things wine.
That's true.
Rosé, there are three primary ways of making rosé, and I'm not going to get into the sweetness, because the sweetness level you can make it any color or any density of richness. So you can always add sugar or stop the fermentation. But there's three ways to have rosé. The first is the Provence style. Because 85% of what they produce is rosé, they claim that they are like the rosé producers, and that everything should be done their way. What they do is very similar to what you see in champagne. They take red and white grapes and they press them immediately. But because red grapes have red skins, some of the pigmentation leaches out. And because they press it directly and all the juice is white, you get some of the passing of the skins with the white juice, and you get a slightly pink, just barely pink kind of rosé. And that's called direct press. So that's what they use in Provence. The second method is called maceration, or it can be cold maceration, or it can be called cold soak. What they do is they crush the grapes, red and white, or just red, and they leave it in the skins with the juice, not before you ferment. So it's just juice. It's not juice and wine yet. It's just juice. They let it sit there and soak for, I don't know, maybe a couple of hours, 12 hours, 48 hours. The longer you leave the skins in, the more the color leaches out of the red skins. Now, if you have a thin-skinned grape like Pinot Noir, it's not going to be as deep a color as, let's say, a Malbec. So you're going to have differences in the tinges of color. But the longer you leave the skins in there, the deeper color is going to be. The last method is called saignée, which means bled in French. So you're bleeding color. And with this method, it's like using red wine making methods to make rosé. So let's say you're making a red wine, you crush the grapes, and you're leaving it in there in juice, and it starts to ferment. And as it's starting to ferment, the alcohol starts going up, which is a leaching agent. So it leaches the color out of the skins that much faster than in just juice. So it leaches the color out, really intensifying the process. And all of a sudden, you take some of the juice and wine out, and you let that ferment to dryness. And then as it keeps going, you're left with more skins, less juice in the original vat, and you just keep taking it out until you've got the correct color and flavor profile that you want. So that's called saignée, or bleeding off. So those are the three primary ways. And the saignée method generally makes the richest and most dense versions of rosé. Some of them look like red wine.
Well, it's fascinating to me because there are categories within categories, below categories. I mean, there's sparkling, there's fruit, there's blush. I knew none of this until I read the book. They're amazing to me. There's crisp, there's fruity, there's rich. You even have a wheel in your book. I love this to help people figure out which is the best for them. How clever was that? I love that. But in the interesting of time, right? You want to quick comment because I want to, before we close, because I want to get into pairing. Your favorite thing to pair?
Ooh, let's do that.
Yeah, and we have 1 minute, so have at it.
So pairing, yeah. So if you like a blush rosé, you definitely want to go with something spicy, whether it's Thai takeout or Szechuan shrimp, because the sweetness is going to offset that spice. If you want some grilled shrimp, you want to go with a light Provence rosé. And if you want something richer, like a lamb or a burger or something like that, you're going to go with a Tavel, a rich rosé. Your
favorite ever rosé you've ever had?
Oh, that's a toss-up between a rosé champagne and Tavel. Tavel, my category is rich. I love rich rosés. But that's not to say I had a Provence rosé last night, which is nice, light, and crisp. But it depends on my mood. But if I'm going out, Chateau de Carrière is got to be my favorite Tavel rosé. And it's $24, and it's fantastic.
Best served at room temperature or cold?
I like it slightly chilled.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, lady, you're great. Love the book. We'll go and have a rosé together one of these days. Cheers, darling. Thanks for being here.
I love it.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
I've been speaking with Jennifer Simonetti-Bryan, the author of Rosé Wine, The Guide to Drinking Pink. For more information on Jennifer, her book, and to learn all about wine, visit Jennifer's website at jennifersimonetti-bryan.com and follow her on Twitter at Jetty Wine Master. You are listening to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. My guests today are wine maven Jennifer Simonetti-Bryan, the author of Rosé Wine, The Guide to Drinking Pink, and James Beard Award winner David Leite, the author of Notes on a Banana. Tune in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show at hallicasserjayne.com. New podcasts posted Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern at hallicasserjayne.com. We'll be back in a minute. Stay with us.
A message from the American Podcast Council.
Hey, everybody, gather around the piano.
All right. That sounds fun. Hey, what you listening to? Podcasts. How can I listen to podcasts?
Here, let me show you real fast.
It's easier than baking a cake.
Well, I should hope so.
Hey, you know there's nothing on earth like a genuine, bona fide, electrified 3-part podcast?
Yeah?
That's right. And it seems today, in our troubled world, most people don't know what a podcast is.
No!
It's true, but you know. Got one in your ear right now.
Sure do.
So please, help me out. Show your friends and neighbors how to cast a pod.
Okay.
Then tell the world about your favorite show using hashtag Tripod. That's TRYPOD with a capital T and that rhymes with P, and you know what that stands for.
Podcast.
Hashtag Tripod. That's TRY pod.
Two-time James Beard Award winner David Leite has tackled everything from chocolate chip cookies to fried clams, from the foods of Portugal to the tribulations of being a super taster for print, radio, and television. In 1999, he founded the website Leite's Culinaria, and in 2006, he had the distinction of being the first winner ever of a James Beard Award for a website, a feat he repeated in 2007. A regular correspondent and guest host on NPR's The Splendid Table, David's first book, The New Portuguese Table, Exciting Flavors from Europe's Western Coast, won the 2010 Julia Child Award. Now David is back with his brave and moving memoir, Notes on a Banana, a story of food, love, and manic depression. Born into a devoutly Catholic food-crazed family of Azorean immigrants in 1960s Fall River, Massachusetts, David had a childhood that was the stuff of sitcoms. But what no one knew was that this smart, determined dreamer with a vivid imagination also struggled with the frightening mood swings of bipolar disorder. To cope, Banana, as his mother endearingly called him, found relief and comfort in food, watching reruns of Julia Child, and later, as an adult, cooking for others. It was only in his mid-30s, after years of desperate searching, that he finally uncovered the truth about himself, received proper medical treatment, and began healing. It's a story riff with the exhilarating highs and shattering lows of a life peppered with David's trademark sense of humor. Let's talk. All right, you brave soul, David. Truth, it's true, it's true. Truth always makes the most powerful memoirs, and truthful you have been in this one. And funny and observant. And like I told you off air, I gave you a back-ass compliment. This is beautiful. It is, but it's beautifully written, and I want everybody to read it because it is just really nicely done. Just nicely. You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Halli.
Yeah, and your attention to detail. Just for the record, I was Karen on the Musketeers.
Oh, were you? Okay. So you know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I really do. But let's get to the question. Why now? Why did you write this thing now? I mean, what started you on this journey?
Well, I decided originally was going to write a book of essays, funny food essays that just, kind of followed along some of the essays that I've written for Bon Appetit and other places, and my also from website Leite's Culinaria. And when I put them all together and I showed my agent, I realized that there was this big gap that was missing. And the big gap was not just in time, but also in content. And the content was that I was bipolar. And I had not come out. I'd already come out for about being gay online, but I've never came out anywhere about being bipolar. And so I played around before I decided to do this. I put up a blog post on my website called Bipolar Disorder and Julia Child, My Therapist. And part of that is in the book. And it talks about how when I was a kid, 11, 12, 13 years old, I'd come home from school and I would watch reruns of Julia Child, and sort of the punitive hamster wheel of punitive thoughts in my head would stop for that half hour, and how it was a relief. And actually sometimes I could even laugh, and I felt okay because this heaviness was besetting me. And I decided to put it up on my website, and I was told actually by my partner Alan not to. It'd be a mistake because no one knows me as writing about mental health. Colleagues said the same thing, and so I did put it off for a while. And when I finally did post it, setting aside the congratulations and the wow, this is really brave, and wow, you're very courageous and very descriptive, a conversation opened up. People started saying, oh, my husband has this. My wife has this. I think my boss has this, and I don't think he's medicated. And it was, but it was one woman who wrote me privately who said, I just wish my son would have read this before he killed himself. And it was that email that made me realize, if my words have the power to help others, and if my story can in any way make other people feel as if they can get through their difficult times, then I have a responsibility to write this. And that's how it started.
So let's start at the beginning. As the song says, a very good place to start. Right? You're the son of two immigrants from the Azores, grew up in Massachusetts, a Massachusetts town that you described, I love this description, pretty much in the geographic armpit of the state.
It was.
Oh, my God.
Still is.
But
Yes.
tell us about that childhood, how you think it framed you.
That's a very good question. And I think how it framed me, it gave me things that I didn't appreciate until 20, 30 years later. I grew up in a very immigrant home. My mom was born here, but everyone else besides my mom and I were born back in the Azores, which are 9 islands about 1,000 miles off the coast of Portugal, kind of right in the middle of the Atlantic. But imagine a home where you have a grandmother, grandfather, godmother, godfather, cousin, mother, father, and you all in one big house in 3 apartments, and at any given weekend, another 15 or 20 other people, either relations or extended relations or friends, coming over to eat. It was always loud. It was always raucous. I has a chapter 2, I believe, is called Sisters of the Spatula, and I had like 8 mothers, and I talk about how we were children of the street, and children of the neighborhood, and that every mother felt that they were our mother, and every father, if you were in their yard and you were acting, you were goofing off, and they wouldn't hesitate to whack you and crack you across the ass as if they were your father, because everyone looked out for everyone. And that was a wonderful thing, and I loved that. But where I had the problem early on was I didn't want to be Portuguese because I did not know anything other than Portuguese. And of course, I had to eat things like, salt cod and tripe and really pulsating purple octopus stew and just really a kale soup and sausage soup and things that no kid wants to eat, because my lens onto the world was my television set. And when I looked through that lens, like, remember Romper Room, and you go through the magic mirror and you'd see all that was out there in this world? Well, I always say that I wanted to be blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and the adopted son of Darren and Samantha Stevens on Bewitched. I wanted to be a wasp, and it just never was going to happen. And it was that sense of disconnection to the outside world, or what was being portrayed to me as the outside world, that made me go, I don't want to be Portuguese, and started putting the brakes on my culture. And I, at a very, very early age, just said no to anything Portuguese.
I can really relate to that. I wish I could tell you in the ways that I relate to that. Blonde hair, blue eyes, but Jewish in a waspy world.
Yes. Okay. So you get it.
I totally got it, and I so related to what you were saying, and I understand how that makes for such an insecure sense of self. You just don't fit in, and it's just the luck of the dice where you wound up growing up. But you know what? Those women of the spatula, I love those ladies, and I love your mom. Oh, my God. I love the way she interacted with you and controlled you and dealt with you. I mean, you were very lucky in that sense. I'm sure you know that.
Yes.
But this issue of fitting in is always one of the great struggles of youth. And in your case, it seemed really a great struggle, not just, of course, because of being Portuguese versus being, one of the pretty blonde, blue-eyed types, but also because of your experience in episodes of this extreme panic and anxiety, insomnia that was started in your youth. And then we're going to talk about being gay, but kind of just overall introduce us to these themes.
Sure. Early on, it started, the major issues started when I was 11 years old. But my mom and my godmother, who were the two, me and my grandmother, the three women who truly, truly raised me the most out of all the neighborhood, in hindsight, say, well, I remember you being 2 years old and you seeing something on TV, and you would fly into the kitchen and crying inconsolably and just fit to be tied, if you will. And I was watching Captain Kangaroo, or seeing the mailman in the window and crying and screaming and having these fits of fear that was so exquisitely sensitive to my surroundings. And so there was this breadcrumb trail, if you will. But where it really exploded for me, where I found the mother lode of bread, if you will, was 11 years old. I went to go see that old flick, House of Wax, with Vincent Price. I don't know if you remember that.
Scary.
And it was 3D, and I think one lens, you had paper, you had cardboard glasses, one lens was red, one lens was blue, I believe is what it was. And it was a kid's matinee, and I'm the only kid who flew out of there with a massive panic attack. Now, I didn't know it was a panic attack. I had no idea what was wrong with me, but this thing just seized my body and took over my body, and I had to propel myself out into the lobby. And I tried to stay there for as long as I could, but I knew if I stayed longer than, let's say, 10 minutes or so, that I'd be made fun of by the other guys that I went to the movies with. So I went back in, and even though I kept my eyes closed, these panic attacks just kept on happening. And it was as if there was this internal keg of TNT that was going off. And when I told my mom and my dad that night, I went home, and after the movie that afternoon, and then that night it happened again, and we all kind of thought, well, this thing will just sort of blow over. Although I was very frightened and very scared, and it didn't. After a week, and then 2, and then 3, and then a month, and more than a month, and we went to our family doctor, and our family doctor said, well, I can give you tranquilizers, and what he meant specifically was Valium. And I was 11, and even at 11 years old, I knew you do not give a kid Valium.
Really?
And my father was hightailed it out of there, and he says no. And the weird thing was, Halli, it disappeared one day. I just remembered, it was like, oh my God, it's gone. Whatever that was, it's gone. I remember I talk much later in the book, but it's like my heart was cupped back in my rib cage the way it was supposed to be, and my head felt tethered back to my neck and my body the way it was supposed to. And I thought, well, that's over. But the thing is, it happened less than 6 months later. Fewer than 6 months later, it happened again.
And what's interesting about all of this is that, we only have our own reality. And when things like this happen to us, it's not something that we overly share with anybody.
Not at all.
Right. And you live with that, and that kind of festers inside of you, and there it is. And you may drop hints to a mom or dad, but can anybody really understand what's going on inside? And there's a secret. And I want to talk to you about discovering that you're gay. Or in the beginning, you said that you had like a penchant for looking at guys, underwear models in Sears catalogs. I get that totally. I mean, I totally do. And then in college, you write that you had affairs with men while dating a woman you fantasize would be your wife, but with whom you could never have sex. I love that. But I have to ask you this. When it becomes the truth that being gay is somehow bad, when do you get that message?
I got that message very, very early on. I came from a Catholic home, and now, not that my mom and dad were saying being gay is bad, but there were just these implicit messages that you get, almost these unconscious messages about how adults would look at other people who were gay or they thought were gay, and you just got these messages very early on that it is bad and it is wrong and it is hateful and it is against God. And I know that there are some people who do believe that. I certainly don't. But on top of it, you were taught to have such shame about everything. See, that's part of the theme of the book. I had shame about being Portuguese. I had shame about having these things happen to me and not knowing what they were, the panic attacks, and I didn't have a word for it for another 3 years after they started. I had shame about realizing that I was gay or perhaps was gay when I was a teenager. Shame, 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 constantly. And as a society, one of the ways in which we control other people or can control other people is to shame them.
Right.
And children are so susceptible to shame because children want to please adults and parents. And I learned early on to become very shameful about who I was and what I did. I was an artistic kid. I wasn't a jock. I mean, the most athletic thing I ever did was jump to conclusions. I mean, I just could not, and I was shamed. I felt shamed about that. Everyone making fun of me. It's when I played softball. And so I just had this identity and sense of self that was so shame-based.
And then I have to ask you this, because I really thought about this when I was reading this. And identifying, as I said, I can identify 1,000 ways. I guess we all can if you think about it. But I have to ask you that if you think that living with secrets, which society often forces us to do, especially as kids, with the shame aspect, if that doesn't just exacerbate the bipolar disorder and all of the other things that make life so difficult to perform.
I think what it does, I don't know if it exacerbates it, but it creates a swamp, which is such a word that's being used so often these days, but a swamp of just self-hatred and a swamp of self-denial and self-censure, that there's no way, even if you are bipolar, there's just no way that you can kind of lift yourself up out of this swamp, because it's constantly pulling back on you. It's sort of like that creature from the Black Lagoon, pulling you back and wanting to keep you beneath the surface, so your secrets don't come out, that you can't breathe, you can't catch your breath to shout, I am gay, I am something, there's something really is wrong with me. And so it may not exacerbate it, but it certainly doesn't help you be articulate about it. And it keeps you, it really takes you hostage. It takes you hostage.
I get that. And it is the Black Lagoon. It's you're in the darkness. You're not in the light.
You are completely.
Right. Yeah, I hear you. The thing about you is you soldier forward, and I love that about you. Your whole life is an exercise in going forward, despite everything you're up against. And you wind up leaving college without a degree, and you go to New York, and you become what else? A waiter, perfect. Been an ad writer. But you also tried to turn straight.
Yes,
David,
I did.
Oh, my God. What are you thinking? I mean, honest to God, gay curing, aesthetic realism movement, I mean, cult, Talk to me.
I know, and especially in today's environment. I mean, I could not have planned this book more perfectly. Here we're talking about immigration in this book. We're talking about gay conversion in this book. We're talking about so many issues, mental illness, and the fact that so many people
Trump
like
wants to
myself,
hang you up alive.
they do, and flay me. After I met my girlfriend Bridget in college, and I do want to say I fell head over heels in love with her. I really did. I just thought that eventually the physical would follow the emotional. I just thought that maybe that's how it happened, because I hadn't really, had that feeling for a woman before. And she was 18, I was 21. And when I realized it wasn't getting anywhere, but the emotions were growing and growing, I had heard about aesthetic realism, which is a cult in New York. They will not call themselves a cult. If they hear this, they will write you and say, we are not a cult.
Let them.
But they're a cult. And one of the things they did was change gay men straight, and it's through their philosophy. And so I thought, oh, yes, anything that could I look at it now, anything that I could simply buy into wholesale that would just flagellate me more with my shame. I was already predisposed to feeling shame, so this organization made me feel even more shame. And it was a brutal, to me, very, very brutal process of this questioning you. Constantly questioning you, and they call it criticism, and it was a really screwed up way of thinking. But when all of your friends, quote unquote friends, are part of the organization, and you spend your Thursday night at the Terrain Gallery listening to lectures, and your Saturday going to museums on classes, and then having an acting class on a Wednesday night, I think it was, and all your phone calls and your men's meeting on a Friday night, that it just becomes so inculcated. And it got to the point that I was drowning in a different way, in that lagoon, a different kind of lagoon. And it was finally, after 2 years, I said, to hell with it. I have had enough of this. Ain't nothing changing. Ain't nothing gonna change. And I turned my back on it. And when I did, my whole world fell apart, because I lost anyone who was a friend. I lost supposedly a friend, my roommate, whom I really loved very much. We were in Carnegie Mellon together, Darren. He left. He stopped being my roommate. He moved out. And I was alone. And it was the first time that I had to accept the fact that I was gay. I did not know that I was mentally ill yet. And although I had suspicions, and I had to face life alone. I was unpartnered. I had no girlfriend there. I had no boyfriend there. And that was the beginning of me starting to get into therapy, a good therapy. I'd been in therapy before. Crazy time.
Part of me wants to say to you, you can't make a left-hand person right-handed.
No, and I'm left-handed, and they tried. And my mother's like, you will not make him right-handed.
Yeah. So there you go. I mean, it's crazy. But it speaks of desperation, and it speaks of we all want to fit in.
Yes.
Welcome to the world. So you soldier forward some more.
I did.
Okay.
I did.
And tell us what happens next, because somehow you meet the right person.
I too. I finally, I was working at Windows on the World, and I'd gained a lot of weight through this time, and I remember I shed it. I got into advertising. I started feeling better about myself. I started getting different friends who knew nothing about this. I was in therapy to kind of work through this. And then I placed a couple of ads in the Village Voice in New York. Now, the Village Voice isn't what it used to be, but it was really the downtown paper. And a lot of the guys who answered my personal ads, and this is prior to computer and Tinder and Grindr and Grindr and Finder, and what all those things are, the apps they have now. And so it was a kind of a caliber of guys that it just wasn't working for me. And I thought, well, why don't I do New York Magazine? So I did an ad in New York Magazine. And the very first letter I opened up, I was very taken by how handsome this man was. But I also say in the book, the photograph, I said, please send a photo. And in the photo, he is so tiny, because what was more important to this man was the vista that he was at, which was this beautiful water vista. And I found out later that it was Martha's Vineyard, one of his favorite places on earth. And we had a first date, and it was a disaster. Most of it was a disaster, because I just thought he didn't match up in my head and in real life with what I imagined in my head and what I saw on paper. And it was because I wasn't giving him a fair shake, and I think the same way for him. But by the middle of the date, we kind of connected, and we closed down top of the sixes where we had our first date. And we've been together now going on 24 years. It'll be 24 years soon. We've been together.
I love it. I love it. You're so suited for each other. And, it's interesting because from the outside in reading it, you see just how much it all comes together just because of the one, as you love to call him. Because after you guys finally get it together and everything is wonderful, it leads to your reimmersion into the cooking you loved and the Azorean culture from which you had separated yourself. And after all the running away from your culture, what in the end did you find in its heart? This is my big question to you that brings you back to it. What are you embracing in that? What's so important to you there?
Embracing of the Azorean culture?
Of the food, of the Azorean food.
I think it brings me back to the armpit of Massachusetts. It brings me right back to the Sisters of the Spatula and my grandmother, whom I do talk about how I would cook with her, and she'd pull over a chair and I'd stand on it, and she'd have my grandfather's shirt on me backwards like a smock. But I had forgotten that for years and years. I mean, decades I had forgotten that memory. And it was through Alan cooking that those memories started to surface. But it brought me back to a time in which food became comfort, and food became companionship, and food became a way of saying, I love you. It's a way of being vulnerable with someone. And I think it was Alan's, because I talk about in the book how my family we're a family of eaters. We eat, we're done, we clean the table. There's just no evidence we ever had a meal. Where Alan's a diner. He likes to sit down, and even if it's Burger King, which back then it was Burger King a lot for us, for him especially, it would be candles, there'd be music, there'd be Kenny G. He loved Kenny G. There'd be china, there'd be wine glasses filled with water. And when we were done, he expected us to sit and continue talking. And I was very unfamiliar with this. This was not something that we used to do. And I think because of that, it brought me to the table, and it brought me to food in a way that I saw the power that food has to bind people. And, food itself is not prejudice. There's no prejudice in food. It knows no cultural boundaries. It knows no gender boundaries. It knows no mental health or mental illness boundaries. It's something that really cuts across all of the issues that I had. And it was the great leveler in a lot of ways. And by being with Alan and cooking with Alan and then cooking with my mom and my grandmother, it allowed for some healing to happen. And I'm very careful in the book to say, it's saying that, food healed us. That's not it. I think we have a very food fetishistic society, but it certainly kind of greased the wheels of social interaction and social closeness and relationships.
It conquers a lot, food. It plays so many roles in our lives. I mean, it's the great uniter. This is what I was thinking, right? And it also brings families together. I mean, families that in every other way, they don't talk the whole year, but they get together for Thanksgiving or whatever, and they duke it out. And it also embraces our identity. And it spurs our taste buds and our creativity. It's sensual, if not sexual. I was thinking, your book was so eye-opening to me. I hadn't really spent a lot of time on this because I'm always on a diet and don't do a lot of food.
I know. Right? I hear you.
Although I love food. Hear me, love food. To me, in your memoir, it's a character, first of all. Okay.
Thank you for saying that. It really is, with its own unique trajectory through the narrative, because it starts out as the enemy. I didn't want Portuguese food. And then when I started having anxiety, it became comfort. And then in college, through my college girlfriend, it became this novel thing where we started cooking gourmet stuff. And then it became the enemy again when I lost weight. And then it became the great connector when I started remembering these things from my childhood. And then it became my craft and the object of my craft and my art now. And so it has its own trajectory.
And that fascinated me because for you, it seemed to me that it's a noun, it's an adjective, it's an adverb.
Yes.
It's life. And that was just wonderful to be able to get through this whole story of yours and embrace that with you, by the way, because you allowed me to do that. So thank you. You're brutally honest in Notes on Banana. banana. Did you worry at all what people would think?
I didn't until it was completely done and turned in, and I had recorded the audiobook. And then I thought, oh my God, I can't get out of this now. I could have gotten it out of it the first month or two. I could have just given back the money. But once it was all signed, sealed, and delivered, I realized, oh my gosh. But then I thought, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what I should have expected. And what I'm getting almost exclusively is people writing me. I even got an email today saying that your book really helped me get through a dark place. A woman just started medication, and she said, I think it was more your book than starting medication for anxiety and depression that has made me feel better, because your book has given me hope. So, I realized, and I was also down in Richmond, Virginia this past week for a book and author event through the Junior League of Richmond, and it was the first time I stood in front of, it was 800 strangers. No one, I knew some people there from 24 hours, but none were family or friends that were there to support me. And it was the first time I stood up, vulnerable and naked in front of these people. And I began to cry because I said that you are embracing me. You know this story. You came here to hear about the story. It wasn't just me. There were 5 other authors. And I said, you have embraced me and you've accepted me. I said, in a way that I haven't really felt before in such a large scale all at once. And it was a very healing experience for me to be there in front of all of those people and hear the applause and the laughter. There was lots of laughter, which made me very happy, and seeing some people stand up too and applaud. And I realized that it's reaching people. I think the book is reaching people almost one by one. It's almost like being hand-sold from person to person. I'm hearing people say, I got 2 copies and I'm giving one to a friend of mine, or I'm putting one in our mental health section of our library. I'm hearing this from people, and it's making me very, very happy. Well, one person that I have a transgender nephew. I have a lesbian niece, and I am a lesbian, and I buy 3 copies. And I thought that was great.
It does its job, the book. It does its job. I want to say that you've got your mental health together.
I try. I have some really bad days, but
we all have bad days, darling. I mean, nothing is 100%. But I mean, you've come a long way, baby, and I think that's wonderful. And I want everybody to know that. So when they read this, it would be, it gives a lot of hints as to what one has to do and what one has to face, and you know that there's hope at the end of the long, sometimes long road. Before I get to my conclusion on this, I want to ask you about your mom and your dad and Alan and how they felt about your exposing all of this. And what your mother, she's such a trip.
My Alan was perfectly fine. As a matter of fact, he read the first draft, and it was very funny. When he was done, he said, this is really brilliantly written. He says, but this is so bleak and dark. And I'm like, what? You know nothing about writing. This is not bleak and dark. It is absolutely knee-slapping funny. And then I started hearing more and more people say that it wasn't funny. So any humor that's there, and I think there is a lot of humor, all came in the rewrite. So he was there from the very beginning of all of that. My mom and my dad have not yet read the book, and I don't know if I want them to read it, because, I mean, there's some very personal parts in there. But on top of it, I don't know if any parent really wants to know how painful their child's life was. And so I've given them that option of whenever they want to read it, we can talk about it. If they never want to read it, I'm perfectly fine with that. The thing is, people keep on writing my mother and saying, oh, my God, Ellie, I can't believe you did this. And, that kid of yours, Ellie. And, oh, my God, that's phenomenal. And so at some point, she's going to want to read to find out what they're talking about. But right now, they're kind of holding off. And it was very funny because we went to a reading back home in Westport, Westport, Massachusetts, which is a couple of towns over from where they live now in Swansea. And she was very nervous about what people were going to think and what they were going to say. And then they were set up for 30 people. It ended up being 55, close to 60 people showed up. They were turning people away. And then when I read and she saw how people laughed and were embracing me and crying, it's like a friend of mine said, look at your mom. It's like her bra size grew 3 sizes. She says she's just so proud. She's like she's like a peacock. Look at her. And I think that went a long way toward healing it for her.
Right.
And because everyone's going to think I'm the worst mother in the world. I don't know how she can say that. She hasn't read the book yet, but
Oh, it doesn't come across like that at all. She comes up at all. And tell her I said so. She comes across as wonderful, just just a terrific lady, and your dad too, by the way. But I have two more questions, and one has absolutely nothing to do with beginning where we were. I'm jumping. Okay. I'm going like my head goes because I'm a little wacko too. Here's the deal. I want to ask you about food. A question I have, right? The best food you ever ate, with whom, where, and what's the one food you will not eat ever?
Oh my gosh. Well, it has to have been with Alan because so much of my food journey has been with Alan. And I think that, the thing that just pops out right now, it was at Heston Blumenthal's dinner. It's a restaurant in London called Heston Blumenthal's Dinner, or Dinner by Heston Blumenthal, forgive me, that's the name of the restaurant. And what it does is he takes foods throughout all of British history and he does reinterpretations. And one of them is called a meat fruit, which is a real historic dish. But what he did was it looks like, I believe, an orange or a tangerine. It's got a little bit of a stem. It's got a real leaf, and it looks just like a tangerine or an orange. It's stippled, and when you slice into it, it is pâté de foie gras, or foie gras mousse, and then the outside is basically fruit leather. So you have that sweet and you have that rich, and it was extraordinary. And I had that with Alan. And as far as food that I won't eat brains. Absolutely not. Will not eat brains. A lot of offal I won't eat, but I won't eat brains. That's definitely off the table. And an odd one for me, coming from my heritage, I will not touch pig's feet.
Oh my God! Isn't that funny?
Not touch it.
Of all the things, right? Well, I get that though. On the pig's feet, I got to say, there's just something. And I love pork, but I've roasted pigs on my farm. But not the feet. Won't do the feet. I'm glad you answered that. I have to go look for that restaurant when I'm overseas.
Oh, you must.
So listen to me. You set out to write a memoir, David, and I imagine there were things you set out to say, and you said them. But when it was all said and done, I wonder what the muses said to David. What did you learn about yourself you didn't know in the writing of the book?
Okay, what are you, Barbara Walters?
I am.
What do the muses say to me? I think they said, you're worth it, kiddo. You made it through, and you're worth it. Oh, you're terrible. You never should have asked me that question. That's what I think they said. When you write a memoir, you see yourself in a way in which you never can see yourself looking back through your life, because you don't have to connect the dots for someone else. And in a complete way, you can have things that are two-dimensional as a memory, and some that are like a bas relief and you can kind of see around them but not quite. And you can have some that are full sculptures, memories that are full sculptures in 3D, and you can walk around them and you can touch them. But as a memoirist, your job is to make it as fully real as possible. And you see connections in your life and you see patterns in your life that you did not know were there. I didn't know what the themes of my life were. I knew what the subjects I wanted to tackle were. I didn't know what the themes of my life were. And my therapist I have a new therapist now. She's having a roller coaster ride. She's just loving this because she's always pulling out the book. Well, you said here, such and such. And it's become almost a guidebook, but I think that I'm worth it. I think that all that pain and all that feeling of otherness and on the outside of looking in of so much of my life is coming to an end. You know, the door's opened, and the door has always been open. See, you are good. The door has always been open. The door has always been unlocked. I just never knew enough to actually try to open the door.
And walk right through, kiddo. I love you, David. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've been speaking with David Leite, author of Notes on a Banana, a memoir of food, love, and manic depression. Do visit David's award-winning website, leedsculinaria.com. It's delicious in every way.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, a production of ROSÉ LLC. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show posts new podcasts Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern. Visit hallicasserjayne.com.